David No, who's going to be sharing, leads our neighborhood engagement team, and Colton leads our development team. Tim Sturgis is our chief administrative officer. Becca Kidd is chief program officer and data. Andrew is our assistant executive director. Carolee, what do you do, Carolee? Carolee works in the neighborhood engagement team and helps a little bit with child sponsorships. Phil Edwards is our chief engagement officer and helps with our lead our volunteers. Les Claxon is with our development team, and Edson Solores runs HR and IT, and Tim Street, hopefully the internet keeps working for you this afternoon, Tim, is assistant director, finishing up his PhD. He's our resident professor, and we were having a good conversation by email yesterday about our 10 assets, and that through his work on his PhD, maybe he wants to amend that a little bit, change some wordage, verbiage, and so we appreciate each one of our colleagues and appreciate you taking time on a Friday afternoon to be with us. Neighborhood engagement. So the question is, who are they? What do they do? How are the epidemic that is ravaging our city is not violence, it's not drugs, it's not all these symptoms that you hear, it's loneliness. We have a whole segment of our culture who believes that no one cares. They do not believe that anyone sees them. They're a statistic, but not a name. And you know, part of our efforts at Shepherd is to bring statistics and relationships together. And so really what we are wanting to do is to engage with our neighbors in this reneighboring the hood in relational ways. Now, at this point, Colton's going to fall over out of his chair and say, the answer isn't more money. The answer isn't more programs. The answer is more and deeper relationships. If in fact we can deepen relationships and begin to build this web of connection, we believe that our neighbors, in many of the issues that we talk about in our six external focuses, there'll be a solution when we come together. We talked yesterday about food and the idea in the families that my wife and I have delivered food to. A couple of times they've said, hey, could we get food and could you deliver it to my neighbor who needs it or whatever? And I said, no, but I can bring you extra and you deliver it. Because it's for us to build these relationships. There, we don't have clients, we have neighbors. And one of those neighbors, 15 years ago, David? Is that right? Am I?
16 years ago.
16 years ago, brought their child to be in our preschool, to enter into our programs. And in that relationship, David and Kelly's life has changed. And it wasn't a program. The program gives us the opportunity to create the relationship. And so for us, this neighborhood engagement team is really about building on the work that so much of our great team is doing in programs to foster that. So David, I'm going to ask you to share a little bit about, tell us what a typical week is for your team and how they're serving and some of the creative things you're doing.
Sure. So we do try to be as creative as we can. The goal is to get in front of neighbors as much as possible. As Jay said, we're not trying to provide a service or a program per se, but to just engage and start building relationship, sometimes from ground zero. And so a typical week for us could look very different for each person, but some of the things that we try to do to engage neighbors, number one is through the programs that already exist. So we try to find ways to serve within those programs. Some of us go to the different sites that we are at, School 58, Cornerstone, where our youth are, and we go there and engage with the youth and the parents, and just be part of life as they're living it. And other ways are our car line. For example, we help whenever parents are picking up, dropping off. We serve in the car line to provide food. I think today I'm giving away cases of water to the families, along with a meal and a weekend pack that provides food for the kids over the weekend. So those are things that occur basically on a weekly basis. And then other things that we get involved in are when we have things like clinics, like the flu clinic, the vaccine clinics, the various clinics that we do. We try to get involved and in front of the neighbors. Different events such as the one that just passed, like Fall Festival, where we had, I think, around 450 people come through. And we try to engage and walk around and just have conversations with them, see how they're doing, things like that. One of our bigger things that we participate in is the Paraclete program, and that involves a lot of staff. Kara Lee could tell you numbers because she reminds me all the time. I think we have around 225 or so families that are in the Paraclete program, and many of our staff participate. And so there's really cool things happening with that. Sometimes our families may have a need or something, that a crisis that comes up. As Jay said, they come back to us, and those staff members are able to engage with them and report back to us, and we're able to try to help figure out how to meet that need, wherever they are, whatever the need may be. And so, go ahead.
Well, let me jump in here just a minute. Let's define what Paraclete is. Paraclete is the one who comes alongside to help carry the load. And so I think the key here is coming alongside with. They're doing something with. It's not doing it to them. It's just that person who comes alongside the neighbor and walks with them and helps them along the journey. Okay, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, and there's some really cool things happening with that. I don't know if everyone knows this, but we have a paraclete who is now serving in our after school program, doing a club for the youth. And so we're trying to find ways that not just us come alongside the neighbors, but the neighbors can come back here and serve alongside us. And it's really cool to see some of those things happening. We also participate in food deliveries each week. I just did mine and got finished right before lunch. But there's so many different people. And I want to go back to something Jay said about loneliness. You can definitely see that in food deliveries, because there are some people who are just so afraid, and kind of cut themselves off from the world around them, where they know we're coming. We call ahead, but they still don't want us to open the door. They won't open the door for us. They want it sat on the porch, and so through what we do with neighborhood engagement, hopefully some of those we're able to build trust and build relationship with, to a point where they open the door, both literally and metaphorically, for us. And so those are a lot of the things. I'm sure there are many that I'm missing. But that's kind of what we do in a typical week.
I think, as you said, in the crisis, so when there's a death in the family, it's coming alongside and helping provide support to the family. It's connecting them to the other services within Shepherd, trying to adapt this idea that if I'm connecting to you, I don't tell you to go call this person or go talk to this person, but I'm your ambassador inside of Shepherd to help figure it out for you and help you navigate through. I'm going to put him on the spot. Tim, yeah, Tim, if as we think of the 10 assets, Tim, are you able to to get on. Yeah, they're. Um, how do you see with this idea of relationships fitting in to such an essential part of building this capacity of folks and helping build their assets?
Well, there may be people on this call who don't know what the 10 asset model is, but it's basically the idea that poverty is about a lot more than money. And the 10 assets are an attempt to define the other assets that may be possessed by stable adults, stable middle class families that are lacking in households of poverty. But if you look at the list, a lot of them have to do with relationships. I mean, the number two thing on the list is support, and support is basically just other people there around, people that we can call during times of need. But then there's also role models and mentors for youth, and the reality is, those things, those relationships affect several of the other assets like health. I mean, the more relationships we have, one of the things we've discovered in our research, the more relationships we have, the healthier we tend to be, because other people come alongside us along the way. And a lot of the issues that we have regarding health, like overeating and other things like that, have a lot to do with attempting to make up for the lack of fulfillment in other areas of life. But even then, when you get down to the lower parts of the list, things like self-advocacy and knowledge of dominant culture, those things are learned through relationships. And so many times when the child grows up in a generation of poverty, they don't have those relationships through which they learn those skills. And so, I mean, when I'm out teaching Poverty 101, I tell people all the time, there's two things I want you to take away from Poverty 101. The first is that poverty is complex. Poverty is far too complex for anyone to wrap their heads around completely. But the second thing is that it's all about relationships. Nothing significant happens outside of a relationship. No significant learning, no significant growth, and no significant, advancement in our lives, really.
Thank you, Tim. Relationships matter. If we want to change crime in our city, it's going to be in the efforts of re-neighboring the hood. Becca is our Chief Program Officer, Data. Talk to us about how we utilize special events to try to foster this as well.
Yeah, so David mentioned a couple of them when he was talking. Fall Fest is one of our larger ones, but throughout the year we have various events, and they help connect with neighbors on a couple of levels. One, neighbors are coming to the event, whether it's to Fall Fest or a Thanksgiving or Christmas event, or something maybe smaller within one of the programs like graduation or something. Parents, families, extended families, sometimes siblings, maybe kids that have graduated from our program that we haven't seen in a while, they're all coming back. And so we get to see them and connect with them and catch up with them. And it's a really good touch point. And people like David and his team or program staff will be there, and are intentionally seeking these people out to touch base with them and see, and to connect with them. And then we also work to involve neighbors in the planning process of these events. So getting their opinion on, for example, last year with some of our Christmas events, survey was done of, what do you feel comfortable with as far as COVID goes, and involved their opinions into the construction of how we planned that. And in connection with David's team, the events team is working to get neighbors to be involved in a little bit deeper in the planning process of the events, to help own pieces, to make decisions about, what kind of things we'll have, and put them on the team that helps coordinate with volunteers and other staff to make the events happen. So throughout the year, these events get us into the neighborhood. If we're delivering things, they bring people here to the East Washington campus, or some of the other campuses. Some events will be multi-location, and really just helps bring people in, send us out, and also involve some neighbors deeper into the planning level.
Becca, one of the things I think of is our Christmas store, which will be coming up soon. And that's an opportunity where we engage. It's really a store for the parents. It's not for the kids. They benefit, but we collect new toys, hats, gloves, socks, underwear. The kids are really excited about the socks and underwear, but the parents then can come and they get to shop, and they'll end up with about $150 worth of gifts for their own kid. And we have volunteers here who wrap the gifts, and the gifts go home and they're from mom and dad or from grandma or whoever that is. But it gives us another opportunity to invest in the relationship of the parent. And we ask each parent for, correct me if I'm wrong, like $5 for each
student? Per family.
Per family?
Yeah.
And last year we donated that money to the Navajo Reservation to help provide Christmas programming on the Navajo Reservation. We do that money so that they feel a sense of, that they have something to give in this. This isn't us feeling sorry for. The corruption of compassion is to feel sorry for. And we don't want to feel sorry. We want to say you have some part of it. And sometimes we have neighbors who volunteer. Mm-hmm. And so that's an example of one that's coming up. And so our special events are ways for us, again, to deepen relationships. It's not random. We're not airdropping things. And as we've talked about, we do food delivery. We're talking about doing medical transportation as ways to have another touch point in and continue to deepen that relationship. I'm going to really put him on the spot. David, what was the key difference in making you want, and your wife, who both work here now, to be a part of Shepherd?
It's funny because we were just talking about that the other day. And it honestly had nothing to do with programming. The programmings, I think, helped us get in the door. But what it came down to was people investing into our lives. Jay was my mentor, and I would still consider him one. He may not think so, but who invested in me and helped me grow in my faith, number one. But then also to challenge me in my thoughts and some of those processes that, when you grow up in poverty, you have to wrestle with. And then there were several others. I can throw names out all day. There were the Grindines, the Petties. There were lots of people that just invested in us, and it was honestly those relationships that not only helped us grow but kept us here.
And we want to build lots of those relationships. One of the things, Andrew, I might put you on the spot here. We think a part of neighborhood engagement is listening. I probably don't do a great job of that at any part of my life, trying to do better. But we want to hear from our neighbors. And so we've started a survey where we've been going door to door in the neighborhood. It's going to take us a couple more years. COVID was sort of a placeholder and we couldn't do it. Talk a little bit about the survey, Andrew.
Sure. So like Jay mentioned, we started implementing this a couple of years ago and have had some interruptions, but we'll continue it. But we've been basically doing that door to door, knocking on doors and taking around either paper copies or our laptops to record answers to people's questions that we're asking. And so we have a variety of looking at what sorts of needs they might have, but even looking at, as we're walking up and down streets, making notes of what's kind of the condition of the street, what's the condition of the houses that are there. Do they seem to be occupied? Are they not? And then when we get an opportunity, when we knock on a door to talk with somebody, asking about what their food situation is, what their health situation is, their health care situation, asking about what they see as the needs in their own community, and asking one of the neat questions is, who are the leaders on your block? Who do you see as the leaders on your block? And that's something that, as Jay talked about, and David and his team are engaging, and we look from a block by block perspective in the neighborhood. that's going to be key of who are the leaders that are already there that we can come alongside and do ministry with. So we're gathering that information in a spreadsheet format, but just the listening and the opportunity to hear what neighbors are seeing, what they're seeing as the biggest needs has been really important. And that, like Jay mentions, is something that we're going to be continuing to do block by block throughout the neighborhood.
We want to hear from all of our neighbors, not just those in authority or those that have means. Lewis and Clark succeeded in their task to find a way to the Pacific because they listened to the person who had absolutely no standing, but all the knowledge. And, unfortunately, in that day, a Native American young teenage girl would not have gained much attention, but they were smart enough to listen to her because she had all the knowledge. And we want to hear from our neighbors who have that knowledge, who can tell us and guide us. And so the number one issue that we have heard overwhelmingly from our neighbors, trash. And I think I've lived here 26 years with my family. I think I would never have guessed that. But then we begin to understand that we have such a high rate percentage-wise of rental properties. When someone moves out, the landlords have to put it out at the curb or the alley for big trash pickup. But many of our alleys are overgrown, and so the boom truck can't get through, and so the items just sit there and people go through it and they get strewn about. And so one of the things in neighborhood engagement team and working with some of our partnering churches to take on blocks and do block cleanups. You say, well, why is that important? Because that's what the neighbors said. And we want to be an organization that listens to our neighbors. We don't want to project on what we think the priorities need to be. And so we've done that. And we hosted some meetings with city officials and Department of Public Works and big trash pickup. And so we've had folks cleaning up alleys, picking up trash. And we want to continue to be an organization committed to our neighbors and listening. And when we listen, that means we're connecting. And connecting means that we're hearing. And hearing means that we're building that relationship. Maybe you've heard the story of the Good Samaritan. There were 3 people who walked by that is described in the story. 2 were too busy. And 1 stopped and risked a lot to stop. And we want to stop. Well, first of all, we want to see our neighbors. We want them to and acknowledge them and see that they matter. We want to have eyes to do that. We want to stop and engage and want them to know that when we're talking to them, they're the most important person in the world, that they're valued. And we want to act. After hearing and listening, we want to act and move forward with them. Phil, I'm going to ask you to share a little bit of some opportunities that we have in volunteering and ways folks could give some time.
Yeah, I want to thank all of you who are on this call to learn more about how to engage our families as it pertains to engaging in deeper relationship with our neighbors. And I'll just say this to you, as one who have grown up in the urban context and currently live in the urban context, relationships are extremely important. We understand that as a staff, and we're simply appealing to our extended neighbors who are maybe not in our neighborhood, but from all over the city. And to say that we would love for you to join us in helping our families break the cycle of poverty and engaging with them. So I have just a few opportunities for you in this regard. You've already heard some of this, but we need folks volunteers to go out and help survey and canvass the neighborhood. We want to hear what our neighbors are saying. We want to engage in conversation with them. Another way is, as you've heard Jay just mention, neighborhood cleanups and block parties. The whole thing about helping the neighbors clean up, that you get a chance to be out and about and to be able to celebrate those experiences is a beautiful thing. To culminate that with a block party, and oh, by the way, you can be praying as well. So we need folks to be able to go with us and to pray with and over our neighbors in our community, because this is a desperate need. And so if you are interested, you can do 2 things. You can call the center And here's this. The number is 317-375-0203, or you could reach out to Donna Alexander. When you call, ask for Donna Alexander. If you desire to connect her through email, her email address is donna@shepherdcommunity.org, Donna, A as in Apple, shepherdcommunity.org. Thank you so much for considering and walking alongside of our neighbors as we engage deeper with them in relationships.
Yeah, Rob has a good question. What do we do to help neighbors connect to neighbors beyond us having to be the ones making that happen? And, I would tell you that part of our goal, if you take this 163 block area right around Shepherd, our goal in that area is to develop a block champion over the next 10 years on every one of those blocks. And then begin to empower that person, whether they're checking on the people who are sick on their block, whether they're the ones that are coordinating the block parties and we're just resourcing them. And in some cases, we are doing that in small ways. If you haven't seen, there was a wonderful article a week ago today on Channel 13 News, and where Scott Swan did a story about Donna and or Granny, as she's known. She's the mayor of that block. She takes care of everyone on that block, and everyone loves her. Sunday, she was telling me she was going home so that she can cook a bowl of soup to take to the homeless camp that's part of her block. And so it's happening, and we want to try to resource them. So as we continue to empower and then help them connect, we want to continue to push them forward. Part of it is, and this is not a political statement, but welfare has said, you don't have things, so I'm here to give it to you. What we're saying is you are beautifully and wonderfully made, and you have something to give. And we want to help them believe in themselves. Sometimes systems takes away their value. And we believe in who they are. You'll see, Carolee, you want to comment? Carolee, you responded, but just verbally tell us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said in the chat, we've had the opportunity to hire several neighbors, both on here on our main campus as well as over at our new early learning center. And from my perspective, I've just seen that as a huge blessing to both our families that we're serving, the neighbors that have gotten hired, and to us, because it gives us the opportunity to empower them to not only be benefiting from our services, but to be an active part of serving and connecting with our neighbors and their kids.
It's good. And part of our commitment at Shepherd is we pay a living wage, whatever your role is. And that's a big step when you talk about a traditional early childhood center, and we're paying folks in the mid-30s to start, and on their 1-year anniversary, they moved to $37.7, which is what Brookings Institute has determined is a living wage, and we provide health insurance, and so we're breaking the cycle of poverty by engaging our neighbors with jobs that we have internally. So that's a good point there, Carolee. With this, there are always opportunities for us to have financial support. Maybe you want to sponsor. At this point, we're looking at in the spring, the next round of block parties, and maybe you want to help with that, or there's other opportunities with our neighborhood engagement team, and they engage with our family services team, which family services really have the expertise, the Center for Working Families, and they're there to bring the programs, while David and his team, which is Carolee and Jorge and Vera, are out there building the relationships. We win when someone says, I have a friend, and we want to be one of their friends. And so, okay, so the question is, where does the police department in trying to connect with the neighborhood fit with your efforts? Shepherd recently received Crime Fighter of the Year for the Southeast District. And we believe it's our job at Shepherd to make the neighborhood safe for law enforcement because we instill hope. Law enforcement corrals behavior. And even with our own police officer, a key difference for our police officer and paramedic team is that they average 27 minutes on a scene where an average run for a IMPD officer is going to be 4 to 5 minutes. We want to work in conjunction with and support our law enforcement partners while helping be a resource. So we host a Christmas with Santa in December for IMPD here and helping the kids interact in a positive way. But through our police officer and paramedic team, there's been a couple of homicides that have been solved through their relationships. And so it's us working with the neighborhood and presenting this idea that we can sometimes be a connector of the two and say, trust us, here's who we could talk to. And sometimes the law enforcement will come to us and say, how can you help us with this situation? And it's on us both ways to help both the neighbors as well as those in law enforcement. Rob, did I answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Well, we appreciate you taking time and talk about this important work of relationships. Relationships matter. This is where we're going to change a generation. I'm going to, Tim, I think this is right, that kids who have at least, I'm going to butcher this. Tim, what is it? How many relationships?
Jeffrey Canada, excuse me, of the Harlem Children's Zone says if any child from any socioeconomic background is going to become a stable adult, they need to have a minimum of 7 relationships and role models in their childhood that demonstrate appropriate behavior. And he would define that relationship pretty specifically, somebody that they're in a relationship with for more than a calendar year, which means it can't even be a teacher, unless that teacher has a relationship with the child beyond the 9 months in their classroom. And studies have shown that mentoring programs that start up and stop actually do more damage than if they'd never started to begin with, because these short-term relationships only intensify the feelings that children have of being abandoned. These are long-term relationships that people really have an opportunity to see great role models.
Yeah. Okay. You see why he's the professor and I'm not. So thank you. We appreciate your time. We'll be back at 4:30 today to talk about and discuss our jobs pipeline. These all are interactive together. They come together to build a continuum of care. We're on the road to recovery. Won't you join us?